Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So if you didn't know, I just recently passed my personal training certification and I am now a personal trainer. This is something that I've been wanting to do for so many years and I finally did it. It feels amazing. I'm so excited for this new chapter in my life and I am excited to start sharing more fitness content with you guys. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the course that I took to help me get to this point. So the educational path that I decided to go down was through NASM, the National Academy of Sports Medicine, and I did their guided study option. They have a couple different options that you can choose from on their website. It is an online course. If you do the self-study, then you just get everything online, including the textbook, but I decided to go through the guided study because I wanted to have an actual physical textbook because it's easier for me to learn that way, and that way I could take it with me places, refer back to the text and flip through tons of different chapters at once, highlight things, add notes. It's just easier for me to have a physical textbook. And then I also had online lecture videos that was so helpful, as well as online flashcards with tons of terms and information that they thought would be helpful for me, and online activities to help you learn different concepts. It was just a lot of added extra material that really made a difference in my education. So I definitely think that the guided study option is a great option, especially if you, like me, did not have a strong background in human anatomy. So first I'm just going to go through my study routine and give you some tips, and then at the end I'm just going to give you general information and tips that doesn't have to do with my daily studying routine. So I actually decided to set my test date first just to make sure that I stayed on track with my studying the whole time and I didn't procrastinate because I knew that my test date was coming up and there was nothing that I can do about it. I just had to wake up and study and get it done. So on a little index card, what I did was I wrote the module numbers, what chapters were in that module, and then the dates that I had to complete it. And I had to study everything and do the chapter quiz by the date that I said, because as soon as the next week came, I needed to move on to the next chapter. And that gave me just enough time to finish in time for my final. And I did give myself a week to do all of the review. So I started my studying on September 9th and my exam date was November 14th. So I did this in just over 2 months, just about that time frame. And it was a lot of information, but if I could do it, then you can do it too. So as soon as I made my weekly schedule, I started to go through all the modules. The first one was chapters 1 and 13. And what I did was I read the textbook chapters first. I read chapter 1, I read chapter 13, and I took notes as I was reading those chapters. As soon as I was done taking my own notes and I had read it thoroughly enough, I went online to my online course and watched the lecture videos for those chapters. So the reason I did it like that was I read it on my own, and then as soon as I watched the lecture videos, I kind of had a general idea of what I was going to be learning in the lecture, and then I could refer back to the text to get it explained more if I needed it. Going into the lecture video first before you read the text is just very overwhelming because there are a lot of terms that you are not going to be familiar with, and they don't go in depth and explain each term that they're just going to start talking about. So reading the text, you have a more thorough explanation of what is going to be then taught to you. So I did the text first with notes, watched the lecture video, and then I went back into the textbook from the beginning of both chapters, and I went through the chapter with my notes, and I made index cards. While I made my index cards, I also compiled a study guide. So every term that I made a flashcard for, I wrote down on my study guide, and I had each term numbered. So for example, here is my study guide up until the midterm. So the first section is module 1, which is chapters 1 and 13, and that covered the OPT model and the introduction to resistance training. So I had flashcard number 1 had to do with muscle imbalances. Flashcards number 2 had to do with chronic diseases. And if I had more than one flashcard that had to do with a specific topic, all of those flashcards would be numbered with the same number. So if I had 5 different flashcards talking about different muscle imbalances, they would all be numbered number 1 because they all had to do with muscle imbalances. And this made it a lot easier later on when I was studying or when I was going over different chapters and I needed to refer back to a specific topic. I just flipped through my flashcards, which I kept, by the way, in different little Ziploc bags. So all the ones that were with module 1 were in a Ziploc bag together. And then I would just find the Ziploc that had all the the notes in this section, I would look for number 1 when I had to refer to muscle imbalances, and then all those flashcards were there. So it was a lot easier to study like that because you would just kind of like pop through and it's all numbered and listed here, instead of kind of flipping through tons and tons of pages of notes because it's hard to remember where a specific note is. This way, all the information on a specific topic are all together on numbered flashcards. So once I made the flashcards with the second time I'm reading over the text, I went ahead and I looked through the online activities and the online flashcards. So with each set of chapters, with the guided study, they had lecture videos, they had activities that had to do with specific topics that you were learning, and then they also had their own set of flashcards, and I made sure to go through those flashcards as well, because sometimes I found flashcards on terms or topics that I didn't necessarily hear in a lecture video or see in the text. So it's good to make sure that you have all 3 different sections of learning material, because sometimes you'll hear something in a lecture video that you didn't read in the text, or you'll see a flashcard that has to do with something that you didn't see anywhere else, and it's just important to hit all those spaces so that you get all the information possible. So the last thing that I would do for each section was I would take the chapter quiz, obviously. So once I was finished with the chapter quiz, and I would move on to the next section and did the text with the notes, then I went back to the lecture video, then I did the second read of the text with the notes and made flashcards in the study guide. I would take that next chapter's quiz, and then once I was done with that, I would go back and take the first chapter's quiz. And then when I would get to the third, I would take the third, the second, then the first. And then I would and I would be on chapter 4. And then I would take chapter 4s, then 3, then 2, then 1. That way, I'm keeping all the information that I'm learning fresh in my mind because I'm consistently taking those quizzes, and it's not an out of sight, out of mind situation, because you do need to know all of that information very thoroughly in order to take the midterm and then take the final exam and then take the in-person exam. The final exam on NASM is not the final exam that you need to take to actually obtain your certification. You need to go in person to a testing facility and take an in-person exam, and that is when you will get your certification. The online final is just for NASM. You do have to pass NASM with an 80% or higher in order to retest for free if you needed to. So that is kind of my study routine. I would wake up and pretty much study all day and repeat for weeks until my exam. So now I'm going to move on to just general tips and things that I did to help me pass the exam. The first thing that I want to recommend is if you have no human anatomy experience, you don't know anything about the muscles in the body, the bones, the cardiorespiratory system, anything like that, then I recommend not following the chapter order that the online class is telling you, because it's going to go from chapter 1 to chapter 13, and it's going to kind of bounce around a little bit, and it's going to go straight into terms that you would not otherwise know unless you did chapters 1 through 5 first. Those chapters, in my opinion, are the hardest ones that you're going to do in the textbook because they require the most memorization and understanding of general concepts. So don't get discouraged if those are the first chapters that you're going to do. Yes, it is hard learning material, but once you go over it a few times, you will understand it. And then once you go through the whole textbook and understand how everything kind of works together, it will all make sense. Just keep on going. I was waking up crying because I was so stressed out every single day because it was so much to understand and memorize, but just keep on pushing through and you will get it, I promise. But definitely recommend doing chapters 1 through 5 first to get a nice strong background on the human body, and then go into just general other stuff with training concepts. When learning the human muscles, I definitely recommend learning and understanding the origin of the muscle and their insertion. That way, when you're learning about muscle imbalances and movements in general of the human body with exercise, you'll understand why one muscle is an agonist, why another muscle is an antagonist, which one's the synergist and which one is the stabilizer. That whole general idea is going to make a lot more sense if you understand where a muscle starts and where it's inserting. So don't just memorize where a muscle is, understand what it's doing in the body. The next thing that I highly recommend is to print out sheets like this, and that way you can label and understand what's going on in the body. So one thing that I liked to do when I was learning all the bones in the body is I went and I found this little skeleton guy from the internet, from Google, and whenever I was learning a bone, I would kind of highlight it in one color and then highlight the name of it in that same color. That way it was a lot easier for me to kind of see what was going on. And then anytime that I learned a different area or a bone in the textbook that was not on here that I needed to know, I kind of added those things in, and then I would just refer to this for a really long time. And I watched YouTube videos on like just easy memorization things that you can do, like play on words that help to memorize certain things. That really helped me learn the bones as well, because a lot of them are just like really weird words and you have to memorize them with no rhyme or reason. So that helped me a lot. So the next thing that I did was I printed out this guy right here. This is the Anatomy Man from NASM themselves, and this is what I used when I was learning all the muscles of the body. So the first thing that I did was I separated all the muscles into sections of the body, and then I learned all the muscles section by section. Don't try to learn everything at once. It's a lot of information. You're gonna overwhelm yourself. Break it down. So what I did was I broke it up: 2 chest muscles, core muscles, adductors, quads, hamstring complex, rotator cuff, and I just kind of learned all those things section by section. And then what I also did was I did my core musculature muscles over here, my local stabilization, my global stabilization, and then my movement system, and I kind of grouped everything together, and then I learned them concept by concept. Don't try and do everything at once. It's really way too much. Just everything that I knew that I was going to need to know and understand conceptually, everything was on this piece of paper, so it was super easy for me to refer back to. If you guys want me to upload a picture of this somewhere, I'm more than happy to, because it took me forever to make these. But yeah, colored highlighters and colored pens were definitely a must for me, because it was a lot easier for me to kind of break down different sections and see them a little bit more clearly. Like, especially with something like this, skeletal muscle bundles, like you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into like the sections. So I kind of like made the colors uniform within whatever, you get what I'm saying. So it was easier for me to see and understand with the colors. Another thing that I found very, very helpful was this app called NASM CPT. It's right here. It's Pocket Prep. I paid for the full version. It was $30, and it gave you access to hundreds and hundreds of test prep questions. And what I love about this app versus the quizzes on NASM themselves is that on here it tells you the reason why an answer was either correct or incorrect. So you're kind of learning a lot more as you're taking the practice quizzes, instead of on here it just tells you the wrong answer and the right answer. So this was a lot more thorough, and it was super helpful. Another thing that you're going to need to take your exam in person is your CPR certification. I didn't know that until the last minute, and I happen to have my CPR certification already. Thank God, because that would have been an added stress that I didn't want to deal with 2 weeks before my exam. So definitely make sure that you have an up-to-date valid CPR certification. You definitely need it to practice and to take the exam. Your test exam date needs to be booked separately outside of NASM. When you sign up for your course online, they do send you an email that says here, when you're ready, set your test date with this other website, whatever. Then you have to look in the area to see which centers have test dates and all that stuff. So if you have any questions about that, definitely call NASM and ask them as many questions about setting your test date, because that was also kind of a little bit of a confusing thing. So I was really nervous about passing my exam the first time, and I was like, okay, what happens if I fail? Basically, if you don't pass your online class with an 80% or higher on your final exam, then you will have to pay $200 to retest in 1 week's time. And then if you fail it that second time, I believe that you have to wait 3 months to take it again, and I'm not sure how much it costs that time. But yeah, there is a breakdown of what the procedure is if you don't pass the first time, but I'm sure that you will. A tip that I have for your exam date is definitely book your exam for sometime in the afternoon. That way you're not stress sleeping the whole night, worried that you're going to sleep through your alarm in the morning and not have enough time to prepare and take your exam by 8 a.m. or something like that. I took my exam at 1 p.m. I had plenty of time to wake up when I felt like it, have breakfast, I went to go pick up a coffee, and then I made my way over there. I was not stressed out. You don't need added stress. It is a stressful thing to take an exam, so I definitely recommend an afternoon test time. That way, you're not stressed. Another test taking tip is to go into the exam with confidence. Fake it till you make it. Go in there super excited, be confident, tell yourself that you got this. Don't go in there with a negative mindset, because then you're going to be overthinking your entire time that you're taking your exam. Just go in with confidence. I promise you, you will do great. if I ever found myself while taking the exam that I was getting a little bit down on myself, like, oh, I don't know the answer to this question, I would just answer it to the best of my ability. I took an educated guess. I knew that certain answers were definitely wrong. I took an educated guess based on the other 2 answers, and then I just said to myself, okay, it's fine. That one might not be 100% correct, but you're gonna know the rest of them. And then you just keep on turning back on that positivity as you're taking the exam, and I promise you it's gonna make a huge difference with your confidence while taking the exam, which studies have shown have proved better test results. Another thing is, don't be embarrassed if you have to like move your arms or your body while you're taking the exam to remember something. Like I did a lot of different movements so that I could kind of like spark memories about like how a body muscles are moving or whatever to answer a specific question. So don't be embarrassed if you have to do something like that. So I think that that is it for all the tips and routine suggestions and everything that I have to offer you about NASM, my experience taking the exam. If you have anything else that you want to ask me, definitely ask away in the comment section below. I will be more than happy to answer all of your questions for you. I know that it's a little bit overwhelming for a lot of people, again, especially if you don't have a background in human anatomy. So yeah, ask away in the comment section below. I hope that you guys found this video helpful. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. And hopefully I'll see you in my next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.